All right, here we go.
Sam has failed his job like 3 days.
I have not been on my game.
The spread of industrialization. All right. No, we're good. Throw it away. Yes. After.
Sorry.
Yep. All right. So other countries sought to copy Britain's miracle, but the British carefully protected their technological advantages. In fact, they made it a crime. They made it a federal, not federal, but whatever the term would be in England, if you divulged what their factories looked like and how they were set up. Sort of like China made it a crime to let silkworms out, and Spain made it a crime to sell tobacco leaves. And yet somehow John Rolfe, the real man who married Pocahontas, got his hand on tobacco leaves, not John Smith, who was a mid-40-year-old curmudgeon-y mean guy. All right. Not Mel Gibson. Over time, industrialization spread to other nations, but at a very uneven rate, as is most things in the history of the world. It is not an even, sharing of knowledge. If the Chinese had their way, they wouldn't have shared anything ever. Big ships and guns kind of motivated the Chinese. Try to stay out of your way here. All right. Remember, if you miss anything, it is recorded and everything is updated on the YouTube channel. So, the Napoleonic Wars devastated the European continent, delaying industrialization. We know this. War has a habit of
Costing money.
and making money. But okay. Well, I don't know if people in Washington D.C. were like, "Gosh, you know what's good for an economy? Let's go kill hundreds of thousands of people." But a short-term consequence, a short-term benefit of warfare is an increase in revenue if you are the country not with a war in their backyard.
Like if you can get a bunch of oil in the U.S. that's.
Well, I mean, during World War II, with the exception of a couple of islands in Alaska, we were never invaded. The war wasn't in our backyard like it was in Europe twice in 30 years.
We did.
No, Japan did. The Aleutian Islands.
That far north?
Yep. But this kind of put a stop to that first round of industrialization because, war. But Napoleon loses, and wow, those are some fancy boxes for 1814. Anyway, protective tariffs are put on goods, and those are just what you think they are. They are tariffs that are put on other countries' things. Remember, a tariff is a tax on imports. And they're put on goods from other countries so that you buy yours. That's the purpose of a protective tariff, to make other countries' goods expensive enough that you'll pay for your local goods. But you have to be careful with tariffs because the tariffer can become the tariffee. Industrialization and infrastructure require enormous capital. Remember, capital is the money you need to put into it. Government and private investors are forced to cooperate. Again, the whole notion of a free market is really going to be tested here. Because every businessman and some businesswomen only have so much available capital. If you really want to get money to do things, go to the source. Go to the crown. They have to work together. And once they begin working together, the government, any government, is gonna want to have a say in where their money's going. So the idea of a truly free market economy can only exist if we are the only people industrializing. That's it. Otherwise, I just the idea of what?
Somebody was updating it.
Ah, there. Good thing I'm loud. All right, good for them. Okay. Countries had some advantages as they sought to industrialize. We know this. England was all industry was close to coasts. They had water access. They had the natural resources. Having natural resources is a plus. Many European countries already transitioned to the putting out system. Again, every cottage is making something. The next step is a factory. Oh, look at that. Huh? Right? Nations can simply copy advanced British technology. Belgium and the United States closely followed the blueprint.
Are you kidding?
Miss Ruth, you all right? Mute.
No.
Vish, your mic is hot. Okay. I did my due diligence. Okay. But the guy who made the first factory in Massachusetts, in Lowell, Massachusetts, actually memorized the British factory and then took it and replicated it in Massachusetts because he couldn't write it down. It was against the law. Britain would be mad.
I think you can mute yourself again.
That's true.
I know the content. I just, like I said that day, I can't do.
Okay. He's talking to his parents. Okay. Would you like to shoe on the other foot?
No.
Okay. Countries had strong governments that financially support industrialization. Again, stable governments bode well for a strong economy. Always have, always will. Countries that seem to struggle economically are struggling politically long before. There are many, many countries in Africa with a plethora of natural resources and means to be successful economically, except for the fact that their leadership is, sophomoric, foolish. Sophomore, it's like a wise fool. It's a contradiction in terms. All right. Basically, they think they know more than they actually do because they're no longer freshmen. That's where the term originates. Okay. Oh, look, it's the United States of America. Greenland, although it's like by 1900, Britain, U.S., Belgium, France, Germany, Netherlands, Northern Italy, and Japan are your global industrial powers. Japan is isolationist. They did this all on their own. Anybody know what group? Somebody did a. Oh, yes. And somebody did a thing on them. Like your digital thing was on the Magi. All right. But good. The Magi. Okay, good. Nice. They did it through isolation and just understanding what had to be done. If you think about the rest of these, those are all subcontinent. They're all part of the continent. The United States was part of England. So it just makes sense that that's where the industrial centers are. Plus, Belgium, France, Germany, Northern Italy, United States have the resources. Have ore deposits, coal deposits. Northern Italy, that is the industrial heart of Italy. And the Netherlands are one of the,
What's in northern Italy? Like, what are the major cities?
Milan. Milan, yep. And Tuscany or Torino, Tuscany, yeah. Okay. And where the Medicis were, that's, yep, Naples. Okay. And crash course, yeah, okay, great. Next, the social effects of the Industrial Revolution. See, this is the second part of today. So it spreads across the world. It spreads to Europe, and it says how. And now the implications and the effects of industrialization. Gosh, this whole unit can be done with that game, Mary. You're right. Basically, you have to create a city, and it's called the industrial. And you have to. I give you basic information, and you have to erase and add and erase and add, and then. No, that one game where I tell you build 12 houses, build 30 houses, and then you get all the background information with it.
Oh.
That, yeah.
That one's
Yeah.
really bad.
This teaches. All right. The Industrial Revolution caused significant changes in people's lives. We know this. Only the Neolithic Revolution is more important. That's a great question. Argue the. All right, so real quickly. Anybody, or whether you're at home or in the room, anybody disagree with this? Anybody think the Industrial Revolution is more important than the Neolithic Revolution, or the Neolithic Revolution is the pinnacle, most important revolution ever? What exactly is it? Thank you for being honest. What's neo mean?
New.
New. What's lith? Writing. Paleolithic is the old Stone Age. Neolithic is the new Stone Age. Writing. You're just writing. And once we can write, we can record, and we can keep track of things and things of that sort.
The farming, like when they first made farming.
That's the agricultural revolution, the first agricultural revolution. Nope, and that's fine. I mean, I'm okay with that too. There are some people who argue that's the worst thing the man ever did. Learn how to farm. Why?
Or they're less healthy human beings. Well, yeah, but like, you know,
We were healthier people when we hunted and gathered. From a dietary standpoint, our diet was more diverse. We'll talk. These will be lunchtime. These will be a little lunch bunch discussions here. All right. Industrial countries experience urbanization, movement of people from the country to the cities, because jobs are good. This just in, making a check is better than not. Ideally, that's what they thought. But remember, life expectancy dropped by over a decade. At the height of this first industrial revolution, people's lives shortened by 10 years. And pollution and the unsafe working conditions and stress, alcoholism, cancer becomes a thing for like the first time ever. Well, industrial kind of cancers become one of the things for the first time ever. Conversely, we get the first millionaires ever. Remember $274 million in American money? Be a millionaire back then. All right. That's part of the reason for the lowering of life expectancy, Sam. Yeah.
Heavy metal.
What's that? And kudos to that one moth who changed colors that one day and blended in with the soot. All right. Yeah. Cities quickly became overcrowded. There's no plumbing. There's no trash collection. There's no police force. No, police force is a relatively new phenomenon. You ever see? Okay, really, really violent movie, but really, really good because Daniel Day-Lewis is in it, and that's called Gangs of New York. It's really good, and DiCaprio's in it too, but whatever. An actual actor's in it, and Daniel Day-Lewis, so it works out. And it deals with this place in New York called the Five Points, right at the beginning of the Civil War when they were drafting people. There were draft riots in New York City, and the Irish would come off the boat, and the first person to see them would be the Union Army and say, "Here, come get a check." So the first day in America, they're given a gun and sent off to the war. But it deals with the fact that there really was no police force, and so gangs and different groups kind of control. And fire companies fought each other to put out fires. Yeah, I mean, again, it does seem counterproductive, but remember, this is 19th century. This is late 18th century into the 19th century. The idea of liberalism back then meant the government stayed out of things. Everything is private enterprise. Everything is, I'm going to start our own fire station. You're going to start your own fire station. Then you're going to fight to get the business. Then hopefully you resolve that fight before the building goes to the ground. But it's not,
if it's private businesses, how did firemen get paid? Like, no one's like paying them to put out a fire, are they?
No, but whoever fronted it, and typically they were volunteer fire departments. There's volunteer fire departments today, so that you could be seen as yeah. Anyway, there's high pollution, there's high crime, remember, until the late 1800s, there's no running water in American cities. Boston's the first. They give us toilets with water that flushes, and Boston and Massachusetts, like I said, is also the first state to give us public education for everybody. Again, it's not called Taxachusetts for nothing. But that's where it started. So cities were a hot mess. And that's not hyperbole. There you go. There's your now this is definitely not a 19th century, early 19th century picture here, because one, it's a picture. So it's got to be closer to the middle of the 19th century. But this is standard regardless of whenever. One room, tenement housing, multiple large families or multiple families sharing space. The only reason for the home was to get enough sleep to go back to work. Remember, 14, 16-hour shifts, 6 days a week. That's the work life back then. There's no minimum wage. There's no time and a half. No workers' comp. Lose a finger, rub some dirt on it, and go back to work the next day. Factory workers lived in urban slums while the wealthy lived in fine homes. The middle class is increasingly moving to the suburbs. So you see that whole flight phenomenon is not new. It was probably immigrant phenomenon then. And you see this disparity too in that movie actually does a lot of there are a lot of nice teaching moments in the movie. It's just, it's a Scorsese film, so it's just wicked violent. Not stupid violent like a Tarantino film. By 1850, urban planning and modern transportation allowed city conditions to improve. Again, there was no urban planning, there was no zoning. You could build a prison next to a school, next to a hospital, next to a garbage dump. It didn't matter. It's kind of like growing up in Myrtle Beach. There are no zoning laws in Myrtle Beach. And I can say that because from the 6th grade till I joined the Navy, that is where I lived. So there's no zoning there. By law, like the fact that there's that smoke shop so close to Millbrook, they've got to just be outside the border. Because there's a law. You can have package stores by schools. You can have certain things by, that's a liquor store, by the way. It's not for packages. So urban planning allows us to develop cities that make sense. That's the business sector. That's the residential sector. That's the the industrial sector. Or 1850, you get that guy in Paris who's like, you know what? Wider streets might curtail violence and barricades. So let's make our streets wider. That's why Paris has wide streets and it spokes from the center. It was so that you couldn't set up barricades and revolt. It's why Washington, D.C. looks the exact same way, because the same guy designed it. Paris and D.C. were designed by the same person. Again, no building taller than the Eiffel Tower in Paris, no building taller than the Washington Monument in D.C., and that's the law. There are zoning laws. Nothing can be taller. Social reformer Edwin Chadwick advocated improved sewage systems for Britain's cities. Yes, he did, especially after the cholera outbreak of 1854, where certain wells were killing people because they had cholera in them. We're just getting to this idea of germ theory, that there are bad things in stuff. If the meat is metallic and green and shiny, you probably shouldn't eat it. That kind of thing. Not the meat I eat. Your meat is metallic?
No, I'm just saying. Like,
Oh.
it's green.
Well, because it's expensive. And if you got meat back then, it was a luxury. So you ate it. And again, you have to remember, this goes back, this is an important thing. This goes back into periodization and contextualization. Try your best through every moment in history to use their eyes. If you're in the 1850s, there's a piece of meat on the ground, and you're a worker in a factory, it's going home. It just is.
So if you said a lot of books and
You cut off what you wanted and cook it. Nothing is wasted. And again, none of us in here, I don't can grasp this like pop, like none of us can. So that's what you did. You dealt with it. In the sentence, low sanitary conditions of populations are everywhere. The sources of irritations, blah 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 blah. Basically, high sanitary conditions are the sources of satisfaction, of political security, of prosperity, order, and peace. It's probably the other way around. If your government is stable, if there is prosperity in your city, the sanitation will follow because that's a cost. Infrastructure is a cost. You know, this talk now, our Secretary of Transportation right now is talking about this huge infrastructure bill and how infrastructure is roads. It is canals, it is dikes, it is bridges, it is dams, but it is other things as well. At least that's how they look at it. It's our grids, our water, our electricity. That is infrastructure. Be a great book. Oh, wait, somebody already wrote it about Raleigh's infrastructure. Scott Hewler. I mean, it may be how kids read it. On the grid. I have many copies. Don't buy it. You can borrow it. Baron George Houseman oversaw a project to redesign Paris. Look at that. Wide avenues, improved water supply. In Paris, I don't know if it's France at large, writ large, but in Paris, water is a need. Therefore, water is free. There's no water bill in Paris. Water is free. You have to have it to live. Paris is like, have water. There are water fountains all over Paris. There are fizzy, carbonated water fountains in Paris. You cannot buy bottled water in Paris. You can buy, they have vending machines with empty bottles. What? And you buy the bottle, and because you can go all over Paris and fill your bottle.
There's water fountains everywhere, right?
Yeah. There's a show on Netflix with what's his name in it? Greatest Showman, High School Musical, Zac Efron. Yeah. Not Hugh Jackman. What?
Oh, I've seen that.
You drink like all different
Types of water, and the more stuff that's in the water, the better it is for you. And you shouldn't drink purified or distilled water. You should drink spring water. The spring water has nutrients in it, like naturally occurring minerals and things in it.
well
Yeah.
water.
It'll say yes, well water would be better than tap or distilled or purified water. If you buy bottled water, and you shouldn't, but if you do, get spring water. Better for you. Better than the chlorine we drink. All right. Paris Reborn. I have to read that book. Working conditions during the first industrial revolution were horrible. This just in. Early factories exposed workers to dangerous machines, daily diseases, filthy conditions, harsh discipline, long hours, low pay. Where do I sign up? Let's go. And this is also why entire families worked. Because that's how many incomes were needed to make it work. And then it just says the normal workday begins at all seasons at 6 a.m. precisely and ends after the usual break of half an hour for breakfast, an hour for dinner, and half an hour for tea. Must be Britain. At 7. Workers arriving 2 minutes late shall lose half an hour's wage. I guess they round up to the nearest half hour. Whoever is more than 2 minutes late may not start work until after the next break, or at least shall lose his wages until then. No worker may leave his place of work otherwise than for reasons connected with his work. All conversation with fellow workers is prohibited. Why would they stop that? Well, maybe revolution eventually, but it distracts them from productivity. If you're talking, you're not being productive. No, you really can't. You can't. The brain cannot occupy two modes of consciousness at the same time. It cannot. You're standing there doing one thing all day.
I feel like I'm just doing this, I can talk all out.
But if you're not true, but then you can't talk about how much it stinks and we need to unionize, which will come later. You can't talk about how the boss is a jerk because it's all about being productive. Workers had no health insurance, no workers' compensation for injuries, little job security. If you were late, you might be replaced. If you were sick, you were definitely replaced. There's always a line of people out in front of the building waiting for you not to come in. The demand for cheap labor led to widespread employment of women, paupers, and abandoned children. A pauper is just a nice way of saying a poor person. Yeah.
How would they like end up working? They just like apply?
Both. Depends on the position. If you're just a laborer, I can work today. Well, I've got a spot. Get to work. If you were an orphan, you were put somewhere. They would come take you from the homes and put you to work, or like in a workhouse, which is where the poor would go in England. Stay there, then you'd have to work to get out of the workhouse. Remember, in some places, poverty was a crime and you went to jail. If you were in debt, you went to jail.
Well,
No. You can be in debt and not go to jail here.
yeah.
Failing to pay taxes is different than being in debt. Tax fraud is different. That's a crime. But being poor could get you in jail back then. Not being on the streets would get you arrested. It doesn't happen today like it's portrayed. Like people think it happens today. There were workhouses where you would go and you would work, and that's how you got to stay. Georgia was a debtor's prison colony. If you owed people lots of money and you were a debtor and you couldn't repay your bills, you went to jail. Couldn't file Chapter 11 bankruptcy, you went to jail. Because there's no government things in place to bail you out or to offer help. Because sometimes life isn't right. Finally, in 1833, the British Parliament passed the Factory Act to limit child labor. And by the way, limit is the word of choice. Children are still working. There's just a limit as to how many hours they can work, what kind of jobs they can do. Like today in North Carolina, a certain age allows you to work a certain amount of time and allows you to work a certain job. That's a byproduct of this way back when and other American laws. And then just so it said, let me see, no person under 18 shall be allowed to work in the night. That's nice. In or about any cotton, woolen, worsted, hemp, flax, tow, linen, or silk mill or factory wherein steam or water or any other mechanical power is or shall be used to propel the work of the machinery. No worker shall not be employed more than 12 hours in any one day, nor more than 69 hours in a week. Yes.
Like,
Yes.
were people kind of annoyed because this just takes away like a little bit of their income, or were they like, this is good?
Well, this is coming about, and the only reason these things come about is because people are saying, look, this is ridiculous. Like there was no accountability for business. There was no accountability for any of these factory lords here hiring kids for pennies on the,
It's also Parliament, which is like.
Well, it's Britain's Congress.
Yeah.
So and if they want to keep their seats and their people back home, their constituents saying, hey, this is wrong, then okay, you're right, it's wrong. What else? There shall be allowed in the course of every day not less than 1.5 hours for meals. That's nice. It shall not be lawful for any person to employ in any factory any child who should not have completed his or her 9th year of age, which means that they were hiring people under the age of 9. Every time you see a "do not try this at home" in the commercial, it's because somebody did. Because human beings are stupid.
Or they're worried that someone will do it.
Or someone will do it, which means someone's done something to it. Like, caution, hot coffee. Really? I know she burned herself. I know it was a horrible thing that why McDonald's puts that on there, but it's coffee. Common sense is authorized. All right. All children shall be entitled to the following holidays on Christmas Day and Good Friday the entire day. Oh, that's nice. Which means they weren't.
Wait.
What?
It didn't say Easter, though. That means
Good
that,
Friday before Easter.
yeah, I know.
Easter Sunday wouldn't be open anyway.
Oh.
Wait, really? They didn't.
6 days a week. 6 days a week. Monday through Saturday. Gotta go to church on Sunday. And then not fewer than 8.5 days besides in every year. I don't know what that means.
Do you like have
Oh, 8 half days. Okay, so they have to have other half days throughout the year. Okay. The social classes. So there are now 3 classes: upper, middle, and low. The upper are your factory owners and your factory managers of the entire factory. They are very successful. The middle class are businessmen, merchants, traders, lawyers, those people, doctors. That's your middle class, believe it or not. Your low class are your factory workers and laborers. And this is actually a low middle. And then there is the poor. The Industrial Revolution restructured social classes in Europe. Yes, it does. The working class included agricultural laborers. 80% of the population make up the working class. And farmers are in there because this just in, farming is working. The middle class would have been here 30, 40 years prior. So you need to keep that in mind too. But the disparity between the haves and the have-nots was even wider before the middle class. And the middle class are going to try their best to leave where they're from behind them. Come on. By 1830s, industrial nations saw an increase in standard of living. So eventually, the quality life expectancy goes down, but then we're starting to see a tick up. Standard of living is going up. By standards of living, that means access to things. Access to opportunities, access to housing, access to education, access to better food. Even the poorest citizens see an improvement. Now remember, it's all relative. Based on where you are, you see improvement, but they all start to see it. Okay, it just begins to grow at the expense of other things. We can discuss the virtues of labor later. Despite rising incomes, the gap between rich and poor increased. Polarization of society, common in industrial countries. Basically, most industrial countries, this occurs. The wealthy get wealthier. Was it the rich stay healthy and the sick? And was it a line from the U2 song? The rich stay healthy and the sick stay poor. That kind of thing. Because think about it, if you're wealthy, you can leave downtown. You can leave the pollution. You can leave and go somewhere where, if nothing else, the air is cleaner. You're not working as hard. You're not working in the family. Your kids aren't working in the factory. So it affords you an opportunity to get away and to bless you and to remove yourself from that. Middle classes, the bourgeoisie, enjoyed unprecedented prosperity, political power, and leisure time. So they start to get some of the taste of the good life. They start to benefit. Their money is affording them an opportunity to experience things heretofore withheld from them. But these are you've heard the term new money? These are new money people. And the old money people, the super rich people, the people who funded these businesses, are still going to look down their noses at them because this is new money. This isn't family money. This is money they made by working. Yeah. Okay, so even if you're a manager, you're working. If you're a lawyer, you're working. The wealthy don't work. They just make people work for them and get paid. The haute bourgeoisie include wealthy bankers, merchants, and business people. These are like the super bougie people. These are the people who call for revolution. Because they want a seat at the table, and they want a seat at the decision makers' table. And they're not going to get it, so they have to yell and yell and yell and yell, and then finally, storm Bastilles and do stuff like that. The petite bourgeoisie are your shopkeepers, your skilled artisans, your professional men, and the clergy. So again, wealthy people, upper middle class, middle class, low. This is your other middle class. Having a good life. They're going to live downtown, but they're leading a good life. Their hands aren't as dirty. They're telling people what to do. They own a butcher shop. That would be middle class. The middle class represents less than 20% of industrial society. Only slowly support reforms because that cuts away at their newfound wealth. So they're not going to be hotbeds of reforms either, even though that is kind of the stock from whence they come. They leave it and they forget it in some cases. Okay, I'm speaking kind of broadly here, but still. The reforms don't come till later, and typically they're led by who? Who are reformers, people? No, women. They're not liberals back then. Back then, it's liberal. Back then is no government. Let me make my money. Liberalism back then is small government involvement. The upper class included captains of industry who headed big businesses. This new elite challenged nobility. Rothschilds, or in America, Vanderbilt, Rockefeller, those people begin challenging, I don't know who it would be in America because there's really no landed nobility. They are the nobility in a way in America. But those types of people begin challenging the families, the long-standing traditional families of Europe for control and for importance. The first industrial revolution also redefined family life and gender roles because, the men work, women stay home. Women are the moral compass of a house. Without women, there's no God in the house. Men are lost without them. We're just useless when it comes to our godly selves. Sorry. Women, it was seen as protecting them, keeping them safe from a dirty and corrupt world. This idea of women on a pedestal, partly chauvinistic and then partly out of the ideals that men were doing this to do them a favor, not a favor, but for their own best interest. While farm families worked together, families in industrial cities often separated. Parents and children left the home to work, then come back. So the fabric of the family shifts and changes. Families in the cities are tired. They're working hard. They're that close-knit, we're working for the same thing isn't there. And you start seeing the family kind of splinter during this time period. Working class men and women typically worked outside the home. Women's wages significantly lower than men. We know that. Middle and upper class women typically did not work outside the home. They managed the family life. The idea of the cult of domesticity, this idea that a woman's place was the home because she was best suited, best skilled to run the home, to teach the children the proper moral ethics, to be the moral compass for the husband, to keep a good home. There were women who believed this is where women should be in the 19th century. You had some women, you had the woman that hired Mary Poppins going out trying to be a suffragette, trying to get the right to vote. You had women trying to get it. Then you had women who said, no, that's stupid. Women should be home. Women thought this. That this is the best place for women to be. Typically speaking, this class of woman, because they could be home. They don't have to support their family. Birth rates dropped for working and middle class families, one of the most important demographic transitions in the 19th century. people have fewer kids when you're working because you can't afford them, and you can't afford to lose your job to have a child. There's no health care. There's no Family Leave Act. There's none of that. Also, a little fun fact, the more developed the country is, the fewer children they have. And this drop in children being born in the late 19th century also makes what happens in the two wars in the first half of the 20th century sting even more, because there weren't the same number of children from 100 years prior. All right. Thank you, sir. And we'll see you here tomorrow. No, you too. Okay. So tomorrow we'll look at the reactions. This is going to be the reactions to industrial society tomorrow. These are your reformers. We're talking about the reform movements tomorrow. And then Tuesday night I'll record F and post F. If you have any questions, I'll be here. If you need to sign up for anything, let me know. I will add 5. Those of you who didn't hear, I'll add 5 points to the test for everybody. And I'll look at them and we'll discuss what I can discuss. Again, College Board doesn't want me sharing any of those. So that's that. And I'll make the little review thing and we'll keep going from there. Thanks, everybody. I'm going to go ahead and stop recording now. And I bid you all a good day.